In war zones, the destruction you see is only part of the story. Behind the headlines and explosions lies a quieter, more devastating crisis: economic collapse. Jobs disappear, markets shut down, and entire communities lose access to basic income. Families aren't just fleeing violence, they're escaping a future with no financial stability. Inflation skyrockets, currencies lose value, and survival becomes a daily struggle. This is the economic crisis no one talks about, a hidden emergency that lingers long after the fighting stops. Today, we will talk about the economic crisis no one talks about in war zones. So before we start, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. One introduction: the hidden economic collapse behind war. When people think about war, they usually imagine destroyed cities, injured civilians, and mass displacement. These visible impacts dominate news headlines and humanitarian reports. However, there is another crisis unfolding quietly beneath the surface: an economic collapse that often receives far less attention but has far deeper and longer-lasting consequences. In war zones, economies do not simply slow down, they unravel completely. Businesses shut down, jobs disappear, currencies lose value, and entire systems of production and trade break apart. This creates a situation where survival becomes the only economic activity for millions of people. The economic crisis in war zones is not limited to one sector. It spreads across every layer of society. Agriculture stops functioning properly due to unsafe land and disrupted supply chains. Manufacturing collapses as factories are destroyed or cut off from raw materials. The service sector, including education, healthcare, and retail, struggles to operate in unstable conditions. Even financial systems such as banking and credit markets become unreliable or inaccessible. As a result, people lose access not only to income, but also to basic economic stability and future opportunities. 2. Destruction of infrastructure and economic shutdown. One of the first and most severe consequences of war is the destruction of infrastructure. Roads, bridges, factories, power plants, schools, and hospitals are often damaged or completely destroyed. Without these systems, economic activity slows or stops entirely. Transportation networks collapse, making it difficult to move goods and people. Electricity shortages disrupt businesses, while damaged communication systems isolate markets. As industries shut down, national productivity drops sharply, and entire regions can become economically inactive. In prolonged conflicts, rebuilding becomes even harder because repeated damage prevents any stable recovery process. 3. Massive job losses and collapse of livelihoods. War leads to widespread unemployment as businesses close and investment disappears. People who once had stable jobs in factories, shops, farms, or offices suddenly find themselves without income. In many conflict zones, unemployment rates rise dramatically, especially among young people and women. With no formal opportunities available, many individuals are forced into informal work, which is unstable and poorly paid. Some are even pushed into dangerous survival activities just to support their families. This loss of livelihoods weakens entire communities and increases poverty at an alarming rate, creating long-term economic instability. 4. Inflation and the rising cost of survival. Inflation becomes one of the most painful economic consequences in war zones. As supply chains break down and goods become scarce, prices of basic necessities such as food, fuel, and medicine rise sharply. At the same time, local currencies often lose value due to economic instability and lack of investor confidence. This combination creates extreme hardship for ordinary citizens who find their purchasing power rapidly shrinking. Even families with savings often see their money lose value quickly, making survival a daily struggle. In severe cases, basic goods become unaffordable or unavailable. 5. Displacement and loss of economic stability. War forces millions of people to flee their homes, creating large populations of displaced individuals and refugees. This displacement has serious economic consequences. People lose their jobs, land, businesses, and access to financial systems. When they move to other regions or countries, they often struggle to find formal employment and are forced into low-paying informal work. Host communities also experience economic pressure as they struggle to provide housing, healthcare, and employment opportunities for growing populations. This creates economic tension and increases competition for limited resources. 6. Collapse of businesses and private sector activity. The private sector is one of the hardest hit areas in war zones. Small and medium-sized businesses, which form the backbone of most economies, often shut down due to insecurity, lack of funding, and disrupted supply chains. Even large companies struggle to operate under unstable conditions. Without functioning businesses, economies lose productivity, jobs, and access to essential goods and services. Investors avoid conflict regions, which prevents new businesses from emerging. This collapse creates a long-term gap in economic development that can take years or even decades to rebuild. 7. Government financial crisis and weak institutions. War places enormous pressure on government finances. States are forced to spend heavily on military operations while tax revenues decline due to reduced economic activity. This creates large budget deficits and increases national debt. In some cases, governments print more money to cover expenses, which worsens inflation. Public services such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure development suffer as funding is redirected toward survival and defense. Over time, government institutions become weaker, reducing their ability to manage recovery and provide essential services to citizens. 8. Long-term economic consequences and recovery challenges. Even after the fighting stops, the economic damage does not end, it only changes form. War-torn economies often take decades to recover because the destruction is not just physical, but structural. Factories may be rebuilt, but skilled workers may have emigrated. Roads may be repaired, but trade networks and investor confidence take much longer to return. This creates a long-term development gap where countries struggle to regain pre-war economic levels. Poverty becomes deeply entrenched, and inequality often increases as some groups gain access to aid or limited opportunities while others remain excluded. Youth unemployment becomes a major challenge, creating a lost generation with limited skills development and few economic prospects. In many cases, countries become dependent on foreign aid and international loans, which can create further financial pressure and limit policy independence. Conclusion. The crisis that outlives the war. The economic crisis in war zones is one of the most overlooked yet powerful consequences of conflict. While destruction, displacement, and human suffering are visible and immediate, the economic damage often remains hidden beneath the surface. It quietly reshapes societies, weakens institutions, and limits opportunities for millions of people long after the fighting stops. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, please give it the thumbs up. Leave a comment and click the button to subscribe.